Good morning, Warriors. My name is Kerry Duval, the Mental Health Warriors wife. Today's our normal coffee morning. You will notice we're missing Kerry Burr. She's running late. She sends her apologies. She will be joining us. I'll watch out for her on the guests. Before I introduce Robin, our addiction warrior, I just did. Oh well. We need some positive vibes sending this way this morning. My sister's not so very good in hospital, so we need some positive vibes sending this way. Hopefully, she makes a full and fast recovery pretty soon. So send your positive vibes this way, guys. Welcome back, Robin.
Thank you for having me back.
How's your weekend been?
Really good, actually. Yeah, it's been nice. We've managed to actually get outside into the nice weather instead of, being in the office and everything. So it was nice to get out and do a bit of sightseeing in my local area, being like a local tourist, I guess. It was quite nice. How about you?
Yeah. Adam dragged us to Bolton Wanderers yesterday, and we got to obviously see the players training. The manager, don't know what it is, but the manager looks very different in person than he does on camera. Don't know what the camera's doing there, but he looks different. He looks very different. He looks taller.
Did you tell him that?
No, I didn't get close enough. Adam wouldn't let me.
You should have put up a sign going, I think you're taller in real life. Let's see what his reaction would be.
Oh, I'd have been pitch side, but the thing is, I've got a husband, so I sort of can't do that anymore.
Can't leave him unsupervised. No,
can't leave a husband unsupervised, and I can't go down pitch side talking to footballers that are probably younger than me. That's just not right. They have to be at least my age. Can't do younger. Don't go for younger men. Not my ball game. No. Don't want to mother a partner. Not a chance. I've done that with Adam enough. Are you there, Robin? I think we're having some technical issues with Robin this morning. Good morning, Kerry. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Kerry. Good morning, Robin.
You're back again. Robin,
I am back. Yes, my apologies for being a little bit late this morning.
That's fine. Robin, are you back now?
I am back. My thing froze. I'm not sure why, but I've changed networks now, so hopefully that should stay stable.
Kerry, we were just saying we need some positive vibes sending this way this morning. My sister's not very good in hospital, so we need some positive vibes sending this way.
Oh, bless. Yeah. Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, hopefully she has a full and fast recovery. But anyway, on with the show. We're talking about trauma this morning. Obviously, I've done a little bit of refreshing my mind this morning. There's a few different types of trauma. There's complex trauma, which is a series of traumatic events, and then it's gone now. It's gone. I'm just gonna let you guys take over. Kerry, you take over. I'm lost.
Well, excuse me. I mean, yeah, as you say, complex trauma is a series of traumatic events. Yeah. PTSD, for example, we tend to associate with servicemen or ex-servicemen who've witnessed atrocities, or even anybody for that matter who has experienced something absolutely horrific. I mean, that's what I'm going to say next is not to sort of diminish the seriousness, if you like, or the what's the word I'm looking for?
The effect.
The effects, the size of the trauma itself, or the event itself. But trauma will mean something different to every one of us. I think I mentioned before, what one actually will believe is trauma, what one person thinks is traumatic, another person won't necessarily. So that there are varying degrees, and it's basically down to us as individuals as to how each of us responds to anything, really. you know.
I mean, obviously with trauma, I just remembered something actually. A single traumatic event, obviously, so like losing a loved one in a traumatic way. So like a few years ago, I've lost my nana. I wouldn't necessarily say I've got trauma, but that was a traumatic event in my life. That's a single event in my life. So, and then obviously there's another type of trauma. The exact word for it has gone. I read it this morning. Refresh my mind. No idea. But that's like domestic violence, so repeated occurrences all the time. You might be able to refresh my mind because it's gone from mine. Go on, Robin.
Well, it's interesting what other Carrie said about trauma as well, because it's a very individual, it's a very unique experience, because like you said, we respond to things differently, and that's one of loads of different factors. So for some people it depends on what it was. So like you were talking about, sort of ongoing ones, so the longer, almost the repeated exposure, the longer it goes on, the more traumatic it can be. For some people, it can be whether they received support or not. So if they found help, if they found someone who they could confide in, that can change how one experiences trauma. Obviously, it can depend on what it is. But yeah, there's so many different factors that can dictate how one experiences trauma and how it affects them later on in life. Because some people can suffer something when they're very, very little. It's got a term. It's adverse child. Is that experiences? Yes.
The ACEs, yeah.
Yeah. So with that, they can experience something when they're very little, but for some people, it can almost defer to a good few decades, and they don't actually start to experience the effects of it until very much later. So it like you said, Carrie, it's a really unique thing, and it's not something that you can just go, yeah, that's happened, so this is going to be the result. It's completely unique.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think as well it's important to mention that we're all working with the unconscious mind, or the subconscious mind, however you wish to call it. And you know, it's there to protect us. So it will actually it'll repress certain memories to protect us. Okay. But what it also does is it will throw up certain memories on occasions, certain issues, for example, that have not yet been dealt with and perhaps do need to be dealt with. So whether that is part and parcel of experiencing the effects of that traumatic event later in life, it's highly possible. Or potentially it's just that, and it's not been until later in life that we've encountered something that has triggered those memories, and therefore the way that we would obviously feel and respond as a result of it. So it's the unconscious mind is a remarkable thing. It's absolutely wonderful, you know, and what we can do with it is just amazing. Equally, what we can do with it can be very dangerous for ourselves, let alone anybody else, you know. So yeah, it's I'm in contact with a few people. A very good friend of mine, she experienced a very traumatic childbirth, and it's affected her in a physical form, which these things do tend to do anyway. I'm also in contact with a guy who works relentlessly in the field of mental health for dads, fathers, men particularly, who have also witnessed their partners, their wives, their girlfriends going through a very traumatic birth. So, you know, it's not one, you know, traumatic birth is not necessarily, it's not just the mum that's going to experience trauma from that, if you like, the after effects from that. It can happen to the dad as well.
Yeah, definitely.
No, that's a good point, actually, and it's something that's becoming quite a big thing now. We're sort of recognizing the extent that something traumatic, like how many people that can actually affect, and we see it a lot with addiction. Like we call them affected others. So those are the people who are around the person with the addiction who have also been affected. So for them, that can also be a traumatic event, and recognizing that they are also experiencing this event and they're also being affected by it, which is why there's now new support for it. So when I present the workshops about awareness of gambling and everything, so when I was younger, I was an affected other for a gaming addiction, and I go into that in a bit more detail, and it sort of reflects now. It makes me wonder, do some of the things that happen to me, like some things I experience, so do I get stressed really easily because of what happened then? Obviously, I can't say for definite because so many things in life can affect these type of things, but it's something to consider. And there can be very young people who are affected others from this. So again, it does sort of it can appear as a sort of trauma, and it just shows how many other people can be affected.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, going back to the kids, kids can experience trauma from a young age, such as if there is domestic violence in the household, and the kids witnessed mum and dad arguing, fighting, throwing things, trashing the house, etc. It can also be traumatic for the children, and obviously the children grow up with that memories. And there's lots of ways that's going to affect the child physically, emotionally. It can affect the way that they view future relationships, the way that they act in future relationships. Trauma doesn't necessarily affect the one person. Obviously, it affects a wide people around us.
So there is that knock-on effect, isn't it? The domino effect, if you like. And I know that a lot of people that have addictions, certain addictions, have them because it's their coping mechanism. But for things of that nature, it's not the same for everybody, obviously, but it does tend to be a coping mechanism more than anything.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, when people say trauma, definitely for me, before I started my mental health training, somebody said trauma to me, I'd automatically think PTSD. That is obviously the most obviously common what you hear. The most common term that you hear is PTSD, which is obviously you associate it with war veterans, soldiers that have been out fighting for whatever country they're in.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm obviously not going to take anything away from those. The absolute hero, brave heroes they are, and salute to all of them. Massive respect to all the veterans and soldiers that have been out and fought for the countries. The horrors they've witnessed while they've been away. I mean, personally, I know of a few of them, and one that I do know that stands out for me is a child threw a live grenade at them, and if it wasn't for her friend reacting as fast as he did, catching it and throwing it in the opposite direction, they'd be dead. But they lived to tell the tale. So that's obviously one good thing. But that single event has cost him very dearly, where he'll never be able to play catch. That's the way it's affected him. He'll never be able to play catch because it just keeps bringing up that memory.
Yeah.
That's horrible anyway, seeing a child with a grenade.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would actually kind of counteract your statement there, Kerry, about he'll never be able to catch a ball again.
That's the way he feels. Yeah.
That's how he feels at the moment. Yeah, absolutely. With the right help for him, and that's got to be of his choosing, obviously. Then he will one day be able to catch a ball again without having that, intense fear and dread that he obviously felt at the time of the event.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It just shows that something like that, it can affect something so small as just sort of catching something. Like, of all the things that would be affected, just playing a game of catch, you'd never assume that would lead to that. And what you said about not taking it away from the soldiers. The thing is, you're completely right in that. And I think it works the same way in that it's usually assumed that soldiers will develop PTSD. However, PTSD can lead on to many other things, but I think those things are often forgotten for the soldiers. So depression, anxiety, panic attacks, people seem to assume it ends with flashbacks, for example, which is an element of PTSD. Everything else almost gets forgotten, and unfortunately, in many situations, many soldiers end up homeless because of that. So in the same way that not many people assume others who don't go to war experience PTSD, the same can work for the soldiers, that they only experience PTSD, whereas trauma like that can lead, if you look at the majority of mental health illnesses, most of the time a risk factor there is previous trauma. And yet there's so little recognition for just trauma, for there being trauma and for someone suffering from it, and yet it can be responsible for almost all mental health disorders. So if that's the case, surely it should be more of a talking point. It should be more of an
Totally agree.
Thing, but an accepted thing.
Yeah,
totally
agree.
Massively agree. Yeah, the same. Yeah,
think,
and obviously PTSD does open up so many other problems. You're absolutely right. Go on, Kerry. What were you about to say?
No, I was just going to say, you know, you're absolutely bang on there, Robin. You know, and I would go so far as to say that, unfortunately, unless these people have got a lot of money to spare, the only help they are likely to be able to access is through the NHS. And absolutely no disrespect to the NHS, you know, they're brilliant, but their resources are still very limited. When they do get to see somebody, you know, be it counsellor, psychotherapist, psychiatrist, whomever, you know, there's still that tendency at the moment to deal with the symptoms and treat the symptoms rather than actually deal with the root cause. And dealing with the root cause of a trauma has got to be done so sensitively. My opinion coming out now, I don't believe that sitting there and pulling apart the actual event and analysing every single little piece of it is the way forward for people. I do believe that can potentially do a lot more harm than good. But on the other hand, that event does have to be dealt with, and the feelings, the thoughts surrounding that event do have to be dealt with. There are ways of doing it, really effective ways of doing it, I have to say. But I mean, this is where I'm coming from. I've had people come to me and say, you know, oh, you do hypnotherapy. Can you help me solve my fear of making cold sales calls? Well, yes, of course I can, you know, but what's causing that fear? What actually causes that fear in the first place, you know? And as you ask the relevant questions and you finally get to the root cause, and it's got nothing to do with being afraid of making cold sales calls, you know, it's something else completely different. So deal with the root cause. Essentially, you get rid of the symptoms. Appreciated with trauma, it is very, very different. So you've got to deal with the root cause, and you've got to deal with each of the symptoms as well, because those symptoms won't just be you know, oh, I'm afraid to pick up the phone. It could be, I'm afraid to set foot outside the house, or as you've just explained, Kerry, I'm afraid to catch the ball. Simple things like that. Simple to those of us that don't experience those things, you know, and yet that person involved, it's in their mind, it's a life or death situation.
And obviously, go on, Robin.
Sorry, no, it's okay. Go for it.
I mean, obviously, trauma can affect you being able to leave the house. So as simple as, I'm going to use for example, veterans come back from war. They've seen horrific things while they've been away, but then on the streets they see kids running around playing, anything like that. That can bring back the flashbacks. which causes the anxiety to come on. I don't want to leave my house. I feel safer staying in this house than being out there. They're all playing football out there or playing a game with a bat and ball. I can't think of any names right now, but you know. Yeah, and they feel safe staying in the house, and obviously that makes the anxiety even worse. And just little things like that. Obviously, we're not going to take away that is a real feeling. People do have those feelings, and that's absolutely fine. But obviously, the help is out there.
Yeah.
You know, and then it's how they choose to cope with it, which might actually take us back to addiction, because addiction can be a coping mechanism.
That's the thing, that's what can lead to an addiction. So for some people, it might be that they engage in these behaviours to cope with something else, and unfortunately it then does become an addiction. And talking about sort of support and treatment and therapy and everything, again, I feel like a broken record, but it's a very unique thing. So for some people, it may be that they don't quite realise why they react like they do, so they might need the time and help to actually go back. I know you said not everybody could benefit from it, and again, that is a very valid point, because not everything's going to work for everybody. But sometimes going back and picking through the experience almost for realization can be useful for some people. Like you said about the veterans, what might be more useful for them and more beneficial is if they sort of go through basically trying to associate what causes the fear response and the PTSD symptoms with something else. Because if someone sees children playing outside and that reminds them of the war, that's an association within the brain. So what might be a good way to go is for someone to help them create a new association, so that their brain no longer automatically thinks that, because when it reaches something like that, it's not even in their control anymore. It's almost a reflex. So they can't even go, I'm not going to be scared of that. They have no choice anymore. So sometimes it does take that time to create that association. Yeah. But a lot of the time they need help. They need someone to help them through that, because if not, they're by themselves and they don't even have control over their own thoughts and reactions anymore. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so obviously they can retrain. Yes, obviously they can retrain the mind. So the kids playing outside, instead of it being a negative thing, they can maybe take it back to a fond memory they have of playing out with their own friends as a child.
There's all sorts of things. There's all sorts of things that you can do with that. And I think, like you said, Robin, that the fact is that they instantly associate it with a specific thing, and that's their trigger. That is their trigger. So it's a lot more complex than just and it sounds easy, doesn't it? Simple. You deal with that, their feelings and their thoughts around that particular significant emotional event, but it's a lot more than that. It's actually dealing with a lot more than that, because we run strategies for absolutely everything: blinking, breathing, speaking, moving a hand, picking up a mug to drink from it. We're not consciously aware of those things, of those strategies. If we were to think about all those strategies and work out exactly how they do work, we'd never complete that list in our lifetime. It's that simple. But we do run strategies for everything. So it's about looking at those strategies as well that are linked to those triggers, and changing those to a more useful, more beneficial one for them, And again, it's got to be something that works for them. But as I say, it goes very, very deep. It's a very, very complex area to deal with.
Yeah. Go on, Robin. Yeah. I think you were saying something.
Sorry, it was just to follow up on what Carrie said, that we've just identified all these different things that need to be done in order to actually get through to this, and yet so many people, they don't get this. Like, the amount of time to do all of this, it's so much time needed just to be able to do this at their own pace and figure out what is actually going to help them, what isn't going to help them, and what they need. So that's why it takes so long. And it's Whether that's going to change, I don't know, because obviously the NHS is just so stretched out at the moment, and it's a shame because we can say, oh yeah, this is what's needed and that's what's needed. It's just whether it happens.
There are, I know certainly of one community interest company that specialises in trauma. Now, okay, they're based in South Wales, but it's kind of accessible for many people. In particular, those that perhaps need to access services like that through the NHS.
Yeah.
There are lots of community interest companies based around the UK that I've no doubt will, some of them at least, will deal with specifically trauma cases, if you like. And I'm sure that many of these can be accessed through the NHS. If not, I'm pretty sure that there's a way of accessing them, getting in contact with them and getting the help that these people so desperately need without having to fork out a huge amount of money. Because that's the important thing, I think, and in particularly right at the moment, is that if somebody's experiencing, if somebody's suffering from a traumatic event that much at the moment, honestly, are they going to have that kind of money to spend out, to fork out, to pay for treatment?
Yeah.
I would hazard a guess and say probably unlikely. So that's where these as I say, community interest companies come in really, really useful.
Yeah.
So there is help out there. It's a case of finding it, really.
Yeah. I'm going to move the conversation on. Adam on the comments, I think it's Adam on the comments, has come up with trauma and veterans associated with Bonfire Night. Obviously, this is a big thing every single year around Bonfire Night. We get think of the veterans, people with PTSD, and before you're setting off all these loud bang fireworks. I mean, we even say think about the pets as well, because obviously cats and dogs don't like fireworks. Mine personally, they hate fireworks. They'll scorch me.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point actually, and I think it is just about, especially with things like fireworks, but any sort of event or anything that you do, it's just sort of being mindful of who is actually around you, who's in the community. And I know it's obviously very appealing to have your own sort of firework display. I mean, I've even been to a couple of sort of like little ones, but lots of places, and there's a couple of places near me where they throw they throw a really big display and they invite everybody in the local area to come, and it's near a castle, so it's a little bit out of the way from people's houses and everything, and they take donations for the local charities and everything. And if people can do that and go to bigger arranged events where there's hopefully less people around to be affected and not engage in as many of their personal ones, just because of I mean, I have a dog and he doesn't get upset by fireworks, but his breed was bred as a watchdog. So every time he hears it, he has to alert us there is something there, and it'll be like all through the night. So, and the same with veterans. It's just about being mindful, really, of who is around you and who might be affected.
Yeah, I mean, while we're on the subject of fireworks, obviously, it's not just veterans that obviously don't like fireworks. Children with autism as well don't like fireworks. I mean, personally, we always choose the nice, quiet garden ones. They're nice and quiet. They're nice to look at, but they're quiet enough not to trigger anybody that might be around us. I mean, personally, I don't know all my neighbours, so I don't know if there is any veterans around us. Yeah, but I keep them nice and quiet in the front garden. And that's plain and simple. It's not just for not to trigger the other people, right? It's for my children as well, because obviously they don't like the loud ones. Neither do I. As a kid, I did. Now I don't. Hey ho.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I love fireworks. Of all designs, and I really don't mind the loud ones either. But I am a very, very strong believer that there is a place for them, and in people's back gardens. I don't want to take people's joy away, their fun away, but my dogs are scared of them. We had a family dog years and years ago when I was a kid, and he was absolutely petrified of them. To the point of actually, at one point he barricaded himself in the corner of my parents' bedroom, literally stripping the duvet and the pillows off the bed and making himself like a little fortress in the corner of the room. And he would just shake, literally shake.
Oh, poor doggy.
Take him outside when they're going off. He didn't bat an eyelid. It was really strange, really strange.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
But yeah, my two, they don't bite them. They do bark.
Yeah.
And they don't care what night it is either.
Mine just hide.
But then I think,
settings.
well, if people are letting off really loud fireworks at stupid o'clock at night, and my dogs are barking, you can't have a go at my dogs for barking and not the person that's letting off the really loud firework, can you really?
Yeah.
Obviously,
But
let's
anyway.
take the discussion back to veterans and trauma. Obviously, the fireworks are going to trigger so many flashbacks of being out there and seeing all the horrors of war.
Mm.
And that obviously that can't be nice.
No.
Personally, I've signed a couple of petitions I've seen online where fireworks should only be for organised displays only. They should be banned from public sale. And obviously, I've backed it. Even though I like the little quiet ones in my front garden, I've backed the ban of sale from general public. I just have. Because I don't like them either.
I mean, to be fair, they're a lethal weapon, aren't they?
Yeah. And if
Yeah.
you fall into the wrong hands, all sorts can happen.
Well, that's it. I just think, crikey, we have to have a license to have a firearm, and the firearm has to be kept in a secure metal case, cabinet, whatever, that's locked, that nobody else can access. And yet we can go into a shop and buy a box of fireworks and set light to them anywhere, And again, I don't want to spoil anybody's fun. I know people enjoy them. I'm a bit 50-50 with the sale of them to the general public, in the sense that I don't want to spoil their fun. And I think perhaps if they can be designed in such a way that they're not going to be really loud, and they're not going to go flying off all over the shop and travel into somebody else's garden 5 doors up or whatever, then something that just is going to stay in that garden, and as long as people can be sensible about the safety of them, then that's fine. But yeah, the loud noises, we're all responsible for our own actions at the end of the day. And I know fireworks is taking it slightly off track, but we are all responsible for our own actions, and we're responsible for the outcomes of those actions. So, if we're going to mess around with fireworks and we get hurt, we've got nobody else to blame but ourselves, have we?
Yeah.
But that's a completely different story.
I was about to say that's a completely different podcast. We can talk about actions and consequences. We can probably have a whole podcast about that. But for now, we're going to take it back to trauma. Obviously, how trauma can trigger lots of other problems, such as addiction. I'm going to do a little hint. Flick back to last week's coffee morning where we talked all about addiction. For anybody that wants to learn a little bit more there. Today is about trauma, and how trauma can affect not only our daily life but the people around us. Because obviously, go on,
that's well, even just sort of on a finishing up with the fireworks, even if that petition never goes through to take them away from public sale, if people are thinking of just doing little displays in their garden, even if they could just write on a little letter and post to the neighbours to go, I'm thinking of doing a little fire display, maybe you want to come, or if you're not keen on fireworks, it'll be at this time if you want to leave, or just to sort of let them know and check they're okay with it, because it's like if you live in a neighbourhood with someone, it's like it's everybody's neighbourhood. So again, even just moving forward, if nothing changes with selling fireworks, it might mean that someone is just a little bit more aware of what can happen to other people and how other people can perceive things and how they can react to them. And a lot of the time, whether it's with dogs or with veterans or with people with autism, a lot of the time it's not within their control to go, I'm not going to be scared of that firework, it's not going to affect me. It's, like I said before, it can be a reflex to the point where there's nothing they can do about it. So if we have control over whether we have fireworks or not, at least being a little bit mindful about how that could affect other people.
Yeah. And obviously that again, it goes back to people choosing to act responsibly, how the actions can have consequences. But again, that's a whole different podcast. So obviously, before we finish, let's talk about where people can go to access the help for trauma and obviously all the symptoms that comes with it. We'll start with you, Kerry.
Well, depending on the trauma, or more to the point, depending on the symptoms as well, to be honest, because obviously we have somebody here that deals with addictions, and addictions are, they are a big problem for a lot of people. And as I said before, addiction is generally as a result of having experienced some kind of trauma during your life. And that doesn't necessarily have to be PTSD. It can be anything, as we've already said. So anybody that specialises in addiction, have a chat with your GP. Your GP will be able to point you in the right direction. There are plenty of rehab places out there, and honestly, the staff that work at these places, I guess much like Robin, they've experienced the addiction for themselves, or an addiction for themselves. They've worked through it, they've got through it, they've moved on from it. It's no longer a problem in their lives. So they have that experience. They know what they're talking about. They know what they're dealing with. But there will also be people there that will be able to deal with the deeper issues, the root cause of the addiction in the first place. So the whole thing will be dealt with as a whole, but obviously in individual sessions, not all in the one. And these places are amazing. I know people that have used these places and have come out the other side, and it's like, they're not a completely different person, but they're alive. They're absolutely loving their life now, and the fact that they've got all this time ahead of them, and they can do absolutely anything that they choose, and they want to do so much, and they know that they're going to be able to do it, and they're not going to be held back by having this particular addiction or that particular trauma. But trauma itself, again, there are loads of places out there. If you're not having any joy through the NHS, get in contact with one of these community interest companies, or speak to a coach like myself. I'm not suggesting that you contact me necessarily, but like myself, there are lots of us around. Have a chat with a few, and find out who you connect with the best, who you feel most comfortable talking with.
Yep. Even reach out to the mental health warriors. Our mental health warrior, Adam, himself has come through trauma. He's had the traumatic events growing up. He's worked through it. He now helps others. So please reach out to us as well. We could even be an avenue that you choose. Have you got anything to add, Robin?
No, just sort of based on what both of you said, and that sort of everything to do with sort of trauma. I think the important thing for people, especially those who've suffered from it or been affected by it, is that it's not their fault.
Yeah.
And that because it's not their fault, they do deserve treatment, they deserve help. And like you said, there's loads out there. And like you said, Kate, even if people aren't feeling like they could get in contact with these other companies, get in contact with us. So like for me, people get in contact with me working at Deal Me Out and my workers, and we can then sort of almost signpost them to the companies and do sort of joint referrals with them and sort of be by their side and sort of be just that the person that they contact first. And it's not like we just palm them off, so we can just help them through it, so we can help them take that first step. So yeah, even if someone just gets in touch with us here at Mental Health Warriors, that is the first step, and that is sometimes the hardest thing to do. And from there, like they can get the support from us as well.
Totally agree. Well said, Robin. Well said.
Well, thank you both for joining us again. Before we go, Adam is live at 1 p.m. today on Warrior TV with a singer called Lily Taylor Lloyd. She's an absolute powerful singer, apparently. And there might be a little bit of singing from Adam. We don't know. Adam, just please don't break my windows. I had to. And myself and Kerry Bear will be back next week on Coffee Morning. Yes, talking about labels. And I think we've got a couple of other people joining us. I'm not too sure. I will apologise for me being a little bit off today. The news about my sister being in hospital has knocked me a little bit. So again, send those positive vibes this way, guys. Hopefully, we've got an update soon that she's in recovery. Or fingers crossed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. See you everybody later. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us this morning. Bye.